My name is Lennox, and I came home after 5 years abroad just to surprise my mom. But the moment I stepped inside, I found her on her knees, scrubbing the floor like a maid, her arms bruised, her spirit broken. And standing over her was the man she married, forcing her to wire $97 million to his son, calling her a useless freeloader while sipping coffee like it was nothing. They never saw me coming, but what I uncovered next, it wasn't just financial abuse. It was betrayal, layered, rehearsed, engineered for years. So here's my question. What would you do if the person destroying your mother's life was living in her house, wearing a wedding ring, and smiling right at you? This is the story of what I did next. The cold felt sharper the moment I stepped out of the rideshare. Spokane had always carried a winter bite, but that evening it felt deeper, almost personal. I stood there for a second with my suitcase beside me, watching the light snow drift across the street. 5 years away, and yet the neighborhood looked nearly the same. My chest tightened with a mix of guilt and hope. I told myself Mom would probably cry when she saw me walk through the door. I even pictured her smile, the way she used to tilt her head when she was surprised. That image kept me warm as I moved toward the house. The driveway held Garrick's truck. That alone made my steps slower. I tried to shake it off and kept walking, telling myself he might have changed or maybe wasn't home. By the time I reached the porch, the small glow from inside the house made me breathe easier. I imagined her cooking something simple, humming the way she did when she felt relaxed. I reached for the doorknob with a strange, fragile excitement. Then everything shifted. The door wasn't latched. It sat open just enough for a stripe of bright light to cut across the snow. That never happened before. Not once. When Mom lived alone, she locked everything, double-checked it, and checked again if she felt anxious. I froze with my hand still on the knob. Something felt wrong. The air coming through the gap carried a strong scent of bleach mixed with something metallic. It made my throat tense. I eased the door wider. "Mom?" My voice came out quiet, cautious. No reply. I stepped inside, pushing my suitcase into the entryway. The house looked spotless but tense, like everything had been scrubbed too hard. I called her name again, louder this time. Still nothing. I walked farther in, my shoes making soft clicks on the hardwood floor. And then I saw her. My mother was on her knees, scrubbing the floor like she was terrified it wasn't clean enough. Her back hunched, shoulders shaking slightly. The harsh overhead light made every bruise on her arms stand out in purple and yellow patches. My breath cut short, my feet rooted to the ground. Before I could move, I heard his voice. "You're not done until I say you're done." Garrick's tone was sharp, dripping with irritation. He stood over her, holding a stack of banking forms. His finger stabbed at one of the pages. "You'll sign it. Silas needs this company launched, and you're going to help. Don't pretend you have a choice." My pulse hammered. 97 million. I heard him say those words like it was a normal request. My mother flinched each time he raised his voice. I felt myself shrinking the way I used to when I was young and didn't know how to fight back. She shifted slightly, and that's when I saw the apron. It hung off her like a punishment. Filthy cloth, stiff edges from old stains. Across the center were uneven hand-stitched letters. Family servant. It wasn't a joke or something worn by choice. It was a role forced onto her. My chest tightened in a way that felt physical. She looked smaller than I remembered, almost fading into the floor. I whispered her name. "Mom?" She jolted, startled, as if afraid she had been caught resting. When her eyes found me, something broke behind them. Relief and fear collided at once, creating a look I had never seen on her face. She shook her head quickly, almost pleading silently for me not to step in. Garrick turned toward me with a smirk spreading slow across his face. "Well, look who finally decided to show up." His tone carried that familiar edge meant to make me feel small. 5 years gone, and you walk in like you're owed something. His words hit exactly where he wanted them to. Old scars, old triggers. I wanted to walk to my mother, pull her off the floor, grab those papers from his hand. Instead, I froze. Same old pattern. My body locked before my mind caught up. I hated myself for it, but fear has muscle memory. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. "What's going on here?" Mom shook her head again, eyes wide, asking me without words not to make things worse. I swallowed hard, feeling anger rising, then collapsing under confusion. It felt like I never left, like 5 years abroad never happened. Garrick grabbed her wrist and pushed the paper closer to her hand. "Sign it, Helena. You drag your feet on everything." His voice dropped lower, darker. "Don't make me repeat myself," she whimpered, a sound so quiet it made something inside me twist. I stepped forward without thinking. My hands were cold, but there was something else stirring beneath the fear. Something tight and old pressing against my ribs. Watching him tower over her, watching her tremble in that apron, watching those bruises. My mind couldn't hold it all at once. Everything inside me snapped into a single point of awareness. Her pain, her silence, my absence, his control. And then Garrick looked straight at me and said something that snapped the air in the room. "I hope you didn't come back thinking you have a say in this house." Garrick said it with a smirk that used to make my stomach tighten when I was a kid. But I wasn't that scared, quiet boy anymore. I stepped forward, my voice steady, but low. "You don't get to force my mother to give up her money," he chuckled, that dry, smug laugh like he was humoring a child. "This is family business. You don't just waltz in after 5 years and pretend you matter here." Mom's hand shook harder around the pen. She couldn't look at me. I caught a glimpse of her reflection in the darkened window. A woman folded in on herself. She used to hold her head high, even when money was tight, even when people looked at us sideways. Not tonight. Before I could say another word, the front door flew open. Silas. His entrance didn't just shift the energy, it flattened it. He walked in like he owned the place, like his name was carved into the foundation. Expensive shoes squeaked slightly against the hardwood. His coat, some brand I didn't recognize, looked like it cost more than everything in the living room. He barely glanced at me. "Is the money ready?" he asked, tossing his keys on the coffee table like he'd done it 100 times. Then he looked at my mother. "Water." He snapped his fingers, snapped his fingers, and she moved, no hesitation. She stood, her knees wobbling slightly, and made her way toward the kitchen. My jaw tightened so hard I thought something might crack. Silas turned back toward me with that same arrogant curl to his lip. "Who's this?" he said, nodding in my direction. "The help?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My body stayed rooted, but inside, something cracked open. A flood of old memories spilled in, the way Garrick used to toss bills at the table and say, "Figure it out." The nights I heard him tell Mom she was lucky he let us stay. The way he'd look through me like I wasn't there. And now Silas, who wasn't even part of our blood, walked in, snapping at her like she was staff. like she wasn't the woman who sacrificed everything. "You always let him talk to her like that?" I asked, my voice low. Garrick gave a lazy shrug. "Everyone has their role." I felt like I was choking on a memory. I needed air but didn't dare step away. Silas walked over to the table and picked up the paperwork again. "Why is this not signed yet?" he asked, annoyed. "This transfer's already late." Garrick leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the fine print. "The numbers are correct. We just need Helena to move her part." Something caught my eye. A small detail tucked in the corner of a form. My mother's name was missing. I stepped closer to the stack of documents, scanning each one. Another, and another. Her name wasn't listed. Not on the savings account she used to manage. Not on the property deed I remembered her keeping in a fireproof box. Not on the retirement fund she talked about for years. "Where is her name?" I asked aloud. Silas looked up, annoyed. "She didn't need it." Garrick chimed in with a scoff. "I manage the money. She cleans. Everyone stays in their lane." That line hit me harder than a slap. Mom came back from the kitchen, a glass of water trembling in her hand. She didn't look at me as she handed it to Silas. Her shoulders curled inward like she was trying to disappear. I turned to her, my voice softer now. "Mom, why is your name gone from everything?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Just a whisper of breath. Then she looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen since I was 12, and found her crying in the bathroom with the faucet running to drown the sound. Fear. Deep, bone-set fear. I took a step toward her, but she shook her head quickly, lips pressing tight. "Lennox," she said. My name, not as a greeting, but as a warning. I realized then she wasn't just scared of Garrick yelling. She was scared of what he'd do if she answered me truthfully. Scared of what he'd take next. I pulled in a breath, slow and deliberate, trying to swallow the heat rising in my throat. Part of me wanted to grab her hand and walk her out that door, right then. Another part wanted to put Garrick through the drywall. But I had to be smart. Not yet. Not like this. I backed up a step and let my gaze drop to the floor, pretending to look defeated. Let them think I was backing down. Let them think I was weak. Garrick turned back toward the table, muttering something about bankers and deadlines. Silas tapped his phone screen, scrolling through texts like this was just another boring night. Then Garrick slapped the table, loud and sharp. "Finish the floor before they call back." Mom flinched. Silas picked up a dirty sponge with his foot and kicked it across the floor toward her. I felt my fists clench involuntarily, fingernails digging into skin. I looked at her, on her knees again, scrubbing for men who saw her as disposable. This house, the one I remembered building pillow forts in, the one where she taught me how to dance in socks on the linoleum floor, it was gone. What stood in its place was a machine that ran on humiliation. And that was the moment I realized Garrick had no intention of letting my mother, or me, walk away unharmed. The thought settled in my chest like ice, and before I could steady myself, he shifted his stance as if he were already planning his next move. I reminded myself to breathe, to stay present, because reacting too fast would only make things worse for her. He wanted control, and I was the one variable he never planned for. He wanted control, and I was the one variable he never planned for. That truth echoed in my mind as his stare drilled into me. There was something different in his eyes now. Not just annoyance, but calculation. He studied me the way someone examines a lock they intend to break. I had never seen him look that way when I was younger. Back then, I was an inconvenience. Tonight, I was a threat. He walked toward the dining table, muttering under his breath about timing and signatures. Mom kept scrubbing, moving the sponge in small circles like she was trying to disappear into the floorboards. Silas sat down on the arm of the sofa, flipping through his messages as though none of this had anything to do with real human lives. While their attention drifted elsewhere, I let mine sharpen. The room was cluttered with piles of paper, folders stacked unevenly, receipts half crumpled, envelopes torn open and left scattered. It looked like someone had been rushing through their own mess, confident no one would question a thing. That confidence, it came from knowing the person you dominate is too afraid to ask. I crouched next to Mom, keeping my voice low. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." Her hand paused for a breath of a second, but she didn't dare look at me. "Lennox, please," she whispered, barely audible. The sound of her voice, thin, worn down, cut deeper than any bruise I'd seen on her arms. I wanted to pull her up, tell her she didn't have to scrub a floor for anyone, but the fear in her eyes told me everything. If I pushed too hard now, she'd pay for it later. Garrick's phone buzzed. He stepped aside to answer it, pacing near the window. Silas leaned back, yawning, too bored to care about anything but himself. That was when I noticed a drawer left slightly open inside the side cabinet. Its edge caught the light. Something about it felt wrong, or maybe too right. A sloppy mistake from someone who assumed no one would dare look. I walked over and pulled it open a little more. A thick black ledger sat inside. I slid it out and flipped it open. The air in the room seemed to change. Columns of dates, lists of accounts, signatures, withdrawals that made no sense, transfers that didn't match any timeline Mom had ever mentioned. Each page was a map of quiet theft. Mom's name appeared over and over again on authorizations, but something about the handwriting struck me immediately. It was too uniform, too perfect. Not the way she wrote when she was tired, or when her arthritis flared, or when she hurried through bills at the kitchen counter. These signatures weren't hers. My fingers tightened around the edges of the ledger. This wasn't just bullying. This wasn't just manipulation. This was deliberate erasure, slow and methodical. I knelt beside her again and slid the ledger toward her. "Mom, look." She risked only a quick glance before shaking her head with a kind of dread I had never seen. "Put it back," she whispered. "Please, Lennox. Put it back." Her voice broke halfway through the sentence. She wasn't afraid of the ledger. She was afraid of what he'd do if he caught her even looking at it. I felt something inside me crack, something that had been holding together for years. A memory hit me without warning. Her in the laundry room long before I left for overseas. Garrick standing in the doorway, telling her she should feel grateful. He kept a roof over our heads, her wiping tears with the sleeve of her shirt because she didn't want to use tissues he bought. Me standing down the hall, too young to understand what helplessness felt like, but old enough to remember the sound of her swallowing her pain. That version of her was still here, still trying to survive, still trying to keep the peace in a house with no peace left. I closed the ledger slowly, like I was laying a hand over a wound. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about how many years she'd lived like this while I told myself she was managing fine. It was about how easily abusers convince their victims the suffering is normal, or deserved, or inevitable. This ledger was more than paperwork. It was a record of everything she'd lost. Before I could put it back, Garrick re-entered the room. He rolled down his sleeves as if preparing for something. His gaze moved from my face to the ledger in my hands, and something in his expression hardened. "Where did you get that?" he asked. His tone sounded casual, but his eyes were sharp and cold. Predatory. I didn't answer. He stepped closer, closer, closer until he could pull the book from my grip. He snapped it shut, the sound echoing in the room like a final verdict. "You're going to learn how things work here," he said quietly. "Even you." Mom stopped scrubbing. Her breath caught. She looked at me with fear so raw it felt like a warning I should have listened to years ago. And that was when I realized Garrick wasn't just trying to control my mother. He was preparing to come after me next. He wasn't threatened by my presence. He felt challenged. That realization hit me square in the chest as Garrick placed the black ledger boldly, deliberately, on the kitchen counter. Not in a drawer, not hidden. He wanted me to see it every time I walked past. A message, plain and smug. This is my house. I own everything in it, including her. Mom drifted into the corner like a shadow, her arms crossed tight over her apron. She didn't say a word, but her posture screamed tension, like she could already feel the thunder coming before a storm broke. I scanned the room slowly. Men like Garrick don't explode without purpose. If he barked loud, it was because he was about to bite harder. My instincts, dormant for years, kicked awake with each breath I took. He stepped toward me, casual in appearance but coiled like a wire inside. "So," he started, voice lower now. 5 years in Germany, was it? Or France?" "Berlin," I replied, steady. "Working in systems security." His nod was slow, too measured. "Interesting field for someone who left home with nothing." "That's how most people start." He tilted his head, lips curled slightly. "I wonder, Lennox, what made you think you could just walk back in here without even a phone call?" "It's my mother's home," I said, holding his gaze. "Or was." He let out a dry chuckle and turned toward Mom like I hadn't said anything. "You didn't raise him with much respect, Helena." Her shoulders dipped lower. I said nothing. I just watched him closely. Every gesture, every step, every angle of control he tried to assert. None of it was spontaneous. It was rehearsed, worn in, predatory. He leaned in slightly. "Don't make this uncomfortable. It's been a long day." Then came the twist. Quiet, surgical. "You know," he added with a smirk, "I spoke with a lawyer earlier this week, just in case." My jaw clenched. He opened a drawer near the sink and pulled out a thick envelope. "Helena signed this agreement. Household management contract. It clarifies the roles, rights, responsibilities, legal stuff. States she's financially dependent, that she consents to oversight." Mom flinched. He held it up like a trophy. "You're technically trespassing. You step into this house again without my say-so, and I have every right to call the sheriff. Might even do it tonight." A bluff. A smart one. Enough to scare her. Enough to test me. I didn't bite. "Why would a man draw up contracts for his wife?" I asked slowly. "Unless he needed to protect something he knew was wrong?" He blinked once. That muscle near his jaw twitched. "Why would you call me a trespasser in a house I was raised in, with a woman who gave birth to me?" His silence was thick, but not empty. He turned away. "You bring chaos, Lennox. You always did." "Is that what this is to you? Chaos?" I gestured at the dirty apron, at the bruises, at the floor she'd been kneeling on for hours. "She's your wife, Garrick. She's my dependent," he corrected. It was then something inside me shifted, not rage, but clarity, a cold, steady click of understanding. He wasn't unpredictable. He was patterned, and patterns could be broken. Mom stood slowly. I should finish wiping the hallway. Her voice was quiet, resigned. She turned and disappeared around the corner before either of us could stop her. I followed, not close enough to crowd her, but just enough to keep her in sight. The hallway hadn't changed much, but now it felt different. I noticed things I hadn't before. The baseboards were chipped from vacuum dings, the same patch of carpet worn thin by countless kneels and scrubbing, a dent in the drywall near the stairs, poorly covered with mismatched paint. Even the air smelled like a secret left out too long. Then I noticed something new. The basement door, newer handle, newer lock. Everything else in the house looked like it hadn't been touched in a decade. That lock gleamed. I waited. Garrick stepped into the guest bathroom, slamming the door behind him. Water started running. Without thinking, I reached toward the decorative bowl by the shelf. A handful of spare keys always sat there. It used to be where Mom kept extras for the garage or mail slot. One of them clicked. I opened the door and crept down the basement stairs, one careful step at a time. The air was cooler, still, the kind of quiet that made you feel like the walls were listening. At the far end of the room, under the flickering bulb, I saw it. A steel safe, new, bolted into the concrete, surrounded by scuffed paint like someone had wrestled with its installation. I crouched down and inspected it. No fingerprints, no dust. It hadn't been here long. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the serial number, opened drawers nearby, checked the furnace panel. Nothing, but I didn't need to see what was inside to know it mattered. The safe existed because something dangerous needed hiding. Upstairs, I heard Garrick's voice echo again. Helena, where are you? His tone carried weight. I moved fast, closed the basement door, flipped the lock back. He was coming down the hallway when I emerged. Looking for the bathroom, I said casually. He stopped, eyes narrowing. That one's broken. I figured that out. A long pause. Then Mom appeared behind him, holding a damp rag in both hands. Her face was pale, but she didn't speak. He stared at me like he was doing math in his head, trying to calculate what I might have seen, what I might have done. I didn't flinch. Then he stepped into my space, inches from my face. You're meddling in things you don't understand, Lennox, he said, voice low and sharp. And people who meddle tend to disappear from this family. Behind him, Mom gasped. But I didn't break eye contact, because what he didn't know was that I had already found the first crack in the empire he built on fear. A crack is all you need when the whole structure is rotting underneath. After Garrick's last threat, Mom turned away from the tension like she always had, back to scrubbing the same spot on the kitchen counter, even though it was already spotless. I watched her repeat the motion, cloth dragging in small, meaningless circles, her eyes focused on a space that didn't exist. Mom, I said gently, reaching out. My fingers touched her forearm. She startled. Not violently, but enough to tell me she was always waiting for something, or someone, to startle her. Can we step outside? I asked. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway like she expected him to appear just for hearing his name in her head. Then she gave the tiniest nod. Just for a moment, she whispered. I shouldn't be gone long. We moved toward the back patio in silence. The screen door let out a tired squeal when I slid it open, and the cool night air kissed our skin as we stepped out. The scent of pine drifted in from the edge of the yard. I closed the door behind us softly, like it mattered not to wake the house. For a second, we just stood there, two silhouettes under a flickering porch light. "Are you safe?" I asked. She didn't respond right away. Then came a smile, thin, brittle, not meant to last. "I'm fine," she said, but the words came wrapped in weariness. "It's not as bad as you think." I crouched slightly, catching her eyes. "He hits you." Her mouth quivered. She didn't deny it, didn't excuse it. She just folded. "I don't want you to get hurt, Lennox," she whispered. "Please don't push him. Don't challenge him. That's how it gets worse." I didn't speak right away. My throat was tight, like my chest couldn't handle what I already knew. I nodded slowly. "But you don't deserve this." Before she could answer, the sliding door slammed open behind us. "Helena," Garrett called out, his tone syrupy with accusation. "You promised you wouldn't let him stress you out. We talked about this. For your heart, remember?" Her body stiffened like she'd been yanked by a string. "And you," he turned his glare to me, "always showing up when things settle down, stirring the pot. You love chaos, don't you?" "Don't," I said, stepping slightly in front of her. He ignored me, looked at her with a voice that sounded soft, but was anything but. "Didn't we agree? That you wouldn't let him bring all this tension back into the house?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then she moved. Just an inch, but it was toward him. Not because she believed him, because she'd been taught to. I felt my heart sink. "She's exhausted," he said with a wave of his hand. "You haven't lived here in years, Lennox. You don't know what it's been like. She doesn't need this stress." He turned to her again. "Tell him." Her voice was a whisper. "Lennox, maybe you should rest. You've been gone so long. They've changed." Not her words, his shoved through her lips. "I'm not here to fight," I said, measured. "I just want to understand." Garrett gave a tight-lipped grin and patted my shoulder like he was some kindly mentor. "Then stop asking questions." We stood there like that, him holding the leash, me holding back the fire. Then she followed him back inside. I stayed behind. The patio light buzzed. The air had turned sharper now, cold biting through my sleeves. But it wasn't the cold that made me shiver. It was doubt. Could I really help her? Could I undo 5 years of quiet control with just truth and intention? Was I already too late? I stayed out there, watching my breath in the air until the lights inside shifted. The upstairs hallway glowed faintly. A few minutes passed before I heard my door creak open behind me. "Lennox?" Her voice was softer now. She stepped in, closing the door behind her quickly, as if the walls might report her. I stood. She looked smaller than ever. She didn't speak. Instead, she rolled up her sleeves, then the hem of her blouse. Then, slowly, she turned and pulled up the side of her skirt. Bruises, not new ones, layered, healed, forming a map. They weren't from falling. They weren't random. Small, round, uniform, like she'd been hit with something intentional, repeatedly, in places where clothing would hide them. She didn't cry this time. She just said, "He knows where to hit, so it doesn't show." I took a deep breath that hurt on the way in. There was something about seeing pain mapped on someone you love that makes you feel like you've failed at something primal. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. "Because I knew you'd do something," she replied. And I couldn't let him turn that on you. I sat down on the edge of the bed. You're leaving this house. No, she said quickly. Not now. Not like this. She sat beside me, gripping her hands. You don't understand what he can do. He knows people. He keeps records. He watches everything. I looked at her. That's why we don't wait. She shook her head, desperate. Just give it time. Let it settle. He'll calm down. He always does. Quiet, I said, is what gave him space to build this hell. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I just said it again, softer. I'll fix this, even if you're not ready yet. She didn't respond, but she didn't argue either. Then the door handle rattled. We froze. Helena, Garrick's voice came through, hard, suspicious. Why is the door locked? She stood up fast, her face drained of color. I rose beside her, steadying my breath. Because this was the moment everything started to turn. The handle turned, then the door swung open with a force that made the frame tremble. Garrick stood there, silhouette sharp in the hallway light, shoulders squared like he'd come to issue a sentence. His eyes scanned the room quickly, first landing on Mom, then on me. His lips pressed into a tight line, jaw ticking. His voice was low and cool, but there was no mistaking the heat under it. What's with the whispering behind locked doors? He asked, like he already knew the answer and was daring us to lie. Mom flinched. She took half a step behind me, as if her instinct had outrun her fear. That was new. I didn't move. I didn't speak. And that pause, it gave him just a flicker of doubt. I saw it. He didn't expect stillness. He expected excuses, apologies, submission. Instead, I stood up straighter. He looked at Mom again. Helena, he said, with a sharpness that made her spine straighten, you know the rule about locked doors. Before she could respond, I stepped forward and blocked his view. That surprised him more than it should have. I remember another rule, I said, the one where you don't touch her, or anyone. He narrowed his eyes. You're forgetting whose house this is? No, I said evenly. I'm remembering who my mother is. That landed. The air thinned, like even the walls were waiting. He tried to close the space between us, stepping forward like he always did, leaning in, trying to remind me of who he thought I used to be. But I didn't back away. You think this is bravery? He scoffed. Coming back after all these years to stir up trouble in a home that finally had peace? Peace? I repeated. Is that what you call bruises? Is that what you call her begging me not to provoke you? His face twitched. Something flashed in his eyes, annoyance, maybe panic, hidden under that rigid mask of authority. I saw the ledger, I said, the fake signatures, the accounts she never touched, the control, the lies. Then I stepped closer, close enough that he had to look me dead in the eyes. You're not a protector, I said. You're a parasite. His nostrils flared. The words didn't just sting. They pierced, because they were true. And truth, to someone like Garrick, was always the sharpest blade. He didn't respond right away. He just stood there, shoulders rising slowly with each breath, like he was holding something back. I saw Mom brace herself behind me, hands clasped tight to stop the trembling. Then, without a word, he surged forward, not with fists, but with his body. He shoved his chest into mine hard enough to make me take a step back. But that was all he got. I stood my ground, feet planted. Didn't flinch. Didn't fold. He leaned in again. You think you can take me? I looked him dead in the eye. I'm not the one who should be afraid. That stopped him. For a second, We were two statues locked in place. The only sound was Mom's shallow breath. Garrick wasn't used to being challenged like this, not without yelling, not without tears. He didn't know how to process resistance that didn't feed him. He glanced at her, then back at me. Calculating. That's all men like him ever did. Calculate the angles. But the equation had changed. He turned sharply and slammed the door shut again, sealing us inside with a thud that shook the glass in the windows. "You don't get to run this house," he said through clenched teeth. "You don't walk in here and rewrite the rules." I stayed still, chest rising steady. Behind me, Mom whispered, "Lennox, please." Her voice cracked. Garrick's fingers hovered near the doorknob like he was debating whether to lock it or throw it open and pull me out. Instead, he smirked. "You want to be the hero?" he said, voice low and mocking. "Heroes don't last long here." Then he stepped back, swung the door open, and left, but not before letting the words hang like smoke. When the door slammed behind him, Mom sank onto the bed. Her hands were shaking harder now. I crouched beside her, placed both palms over hers. "You're not alone anymore," I said quietly. "He can't isolate you, not while I'm here." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. It wasn't hope, not yet, but it was the start of something. From the hallway, something metal hit the floor with a loud clang. Then came Garrick's voice, rough, unfiltered. "If he wants a war, I'll give him one." That voice, laced with malice, echoed down the hallway long after his footsteps faded. I stayed beside Mom, still kneeling on the floor next to the bed, her hands trembling in mine. I didn't speak. Neither did she. We just listened, waited for whatever came next. But the house grew still again. Not safe, just still. At some point, I must have dozed off on the mattress in my childhood room. The air was cold. The kind of cold that doesn't just sit on your skin, but seeps into your thoughts. When I opened my eyes, the first gray light of dawn had crept in through the blinds, a sliver of morning. Quiet. Too quiet. The usual clatter from the kitchen, coffee brewing, cabinet doors opening, was absent. No gentle shuffle of Mom's slippers on the linoleum. I sat up, heart already uneasy. I moved down the hallway, barefoot on old creaking wood, each step slower than the last. The kitchen was empty, dark. The lights hadn't been turned on, counters wiped clean, chairs pushed in, everything in its place, but somehow wrong. And then I saw it. Mom's phone, sitting on the counter, screen cracked, battery warning blinking red. She never left that thing behind. Especially not now. My stomach dropped. Before I could think, my phone buzzed on the table behind me. I snatched it up. Bank alerts, one after another. Account access restricted. Unusual transaction activity. Temporary lock initiated. I blinked, thinking it had to be some kind of phishing scam. But then I saw the name of the bank officer handling the case. Charles D. Harwick. Garrick had played golf with him. I'd seen the man's smug handshake at one of Garrick's backyard barbecues. This wasn't fraud. It was targeted. It was personal. It was Garrick. He hadn't just threatened to go to war. He'd already drawn first blood. I sat down at the table, forcing my breathing to slow. This was calculated. A warning wrapped in bureaucracy. If I fought back, he'd suffocate me with paperwork, legalities, connections. He wanted me gone, not with fists, but with silence and isolation. But he had misread me. Again. I stood and moved quickly, calling for Mom. My voice echoed through the hall. No answer. Bedroom? Empty. Bathroom? Empty. Coat missing. Shoes gone. Front door locked from the inside. I moved toward the fridge and noticed something just barely visible tucked under a magnet. A torn piece of lined paper. Her handwriting, rushed. "Don't worry. I'll be back soon. Please don't anger him again." The words knocked the wind out of me. Not because she'd left, but because even out there, wherever she was, she still feared him more than she trusted me. I leaned both hands against the fridge, forehead against the cold door. "Just breathe, Lennox. Just think." Footsteps from the hallway behind me. I turned as Garrick entered the room, buttoning his cuff, tie knotted tight, coffee mug in hand like he hadn't just dismantled my financial foundation. "Morning," he said smoothly. "Sleep okay?" I didn't answer. He smiled and took a sip. "Hope you don't mind a little financial check-in. Just wanted to make sure you weren't a liability." I stepped toward him. "Where's my mother?" He gave a half smirk. "She went out to do her duties." He lingered on that last word. I felt my fists tighten. He set his coffee down on the dining table beside something I hadn't seen him carrying, a familiar black ledger, open, spread wide like a trap. I stared at it, then at him. He walked away, leaving me with it like bait. I hesitated. Garrick never left anything lying around without a reason. He was dangling this in front of me on purpose, but I couldn't ignore it. I sat down and began flipping pages. Same accounts, same signatures, same numbers, until I spotted something odd. A page near the back, tucked in just barely, like it had been added last minute. Its paper was older, edges fraying, slightly yellowed. I carefully pulled it free. This wasn't just another entry. This was a history. It detailed transactions in Mom's name. Withdrawals, some small, some large, regular, quiet. But the dates, they stretched back, way back, to years before I ever left the country. To before Garrick and Mom were married, to when Silas would have still been in high school. And they led to a secondary account, one that shared the name of Garrick's construction business. My throat tightened. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't recent. This had always been the plan. He'd been funneling her savings from the very beginning, playing the long game, draining her piece by piece, while wearing the mask of a man of the house. I barely noticed him step back into the room. "What are you reading?" he asked casually, voice too smooth to trust. I looked up. His expression wasn't fearful. It was amused. "Old records," I said, keeping my tone flat. He tilted his head. "History has a funny way of making things look worse than they were. She volunteered, you know. Always said she didn't need that money." I rose from the chair. "You didn't manipulate her. You built a cage around her and called it a partnership." He walked closer, voice lowering. "She was easy to manage. You're not. That's why you need to go." I met his gaze. "I'm not leaving her with you." The smile dropped from his face. He reached for his coffee mug, slowly, deliberately, and set it down without taking a sip. Then he said, almost whispering, "Then let's see what you can do, Lennox." He nodded toward the window. That's when I heard it. The hum of an engine. Then a sudden cut, sharp and abrupt. Mom's car. Too fast. Too soon. I bolted toward the front door, Garrick calling something behind me I didn't catch. I threw it open and ran into the yard barefoot. The car was there, slanted sideways in the driveway, engine off, driver's door ajar. But no one inside, and no sign of her. My legs moved before my thoughts caught up. I raced down the driveway, bare feet slapping against the concrete, the engine of Mom's car still ticking. The driver's side door hung open. That image will never leave me. Her frozen silhouette behind the wheel. hands white-knuckling the steering wheel like she just survived a collision no one else saw. "Mom," I whispered, gently touching her arm. Her eyes darted toward mine, wide and unfocused. It took a moment before she blinked, like she remembered who I was. "He called someone," she murmured, voice barely audible. He said, you're dangerous." I looked up. Garrick stood at the front doorway, arms crossed, watching us like he was enjoying the last act of a play he wrote. Not a hint of concern, just quiet satisfaction. A man who believed he'd already won. Before I could respond, the rumble of tires rolled up the gravel drive. 2 sheriff's cruisers. No sirens, no lights, just casual, calculated. I stepped back instinctively as one deputy exited and gave Garrick a nod like they were old church buddies. The second deputy walked slower, sizing me up. He didn't reach for his holster, but his posture said he was ready. "Morning," Garrick greeted them, as if this was a neighborly check-in, not a strategic ambush. "I'm just worried about my wife's safety. Her son's been acting erratic since returning." Raised voices, slamming doors. He let the sentence hang like it carried truth. Mom stayed in the car, still, silent. The younger deputy approached me. "Sir, we received a wellness call about aggressive behavior in the home. Can I ask what's going on?" I looked at Mom. Her lips parted as if she might say something, but Garrick stepped closer, resting his hand on her shoulder. She flinched, but she didn't speak. My jaw tensed. "I came home yesterday to check on my mother," I said evenly. "That's it. No aggression, just concern." He studied me, eyes narrowing slightly. "Do you intend to harm anyone in this house?" "No, sir. I have no intention to hurt anyone," I replied. "But someone in this house is being hurt. Just not by me." I turned slightly toward Garrick, making sure the deputies saw. "She has injuries," I added. "Not accidents, not from aging, from him." Garrick laughed. "Oh, come on, Helena's frail. Trips over her own shoes. You know how it goes." The older deputy's expression didn't change, but the younger one glanced toward Mom. Still, neither of them moved. "We'll give you folks some space," the older one said finally. "Keep it civil." They turned and walked back to their cruisers. Garrick waved at them as they pulled out, like he'd just finished a barbecue. He didn't say anything as they left. He didn't need to. But once the taillights disappeared, he turned to me with that damn smirk. "You see? Heroes don't last long here." I clenched my teeth, not because I was angry, though I was, but because in that moment, something inside me crystallized, a shift I couldn't walk back. This man hadn't just hurt my mother. He'd prepared for war long before I ever stepped back into this town, and he wasn't nearly as careful as he thought. As he walked past Silas near the doorway, I caught it. "Make sure the safe is locked," he muttered low. "I don't want him finding the originals." I froze. Safe. Originals. Whatever was down there wasn't just financial. It was evidence. And he just confirmed it. I guided Mom gently inside. She begged me to stop. "Please, Lennox," she whispered. "Don't go looking for more. That's how he breaks people." "He already did," I said quietly. "But not anymore." Garrick and Silas retreated into the dining room, voices low but heated. Something about timelines, payments, deadlines. I moved toward the basement door, barefoot on the wood floor. Silent. I waited until Garrick raised his voice, just enough to cover the creak of the old hinges, and slipped downstairs. The concrete steps were cool, the air stale. My phone's flashlight cut a narrow beam through the darkness. There. The safe. Steel. Scratched. Worn. I tried the dial. Nothing. But I noticed a slim gap near the latch, barely visible. I searched the tool drawers nearby, Dad's old junk, and found a rusted shim. Slid it in gently. Twisted. Click. The door cracked open. I pulled it wide. Folders, envelopes, bank statements, 2 ledgers, one a polished lie, the other raw, hand-noted, real. This one included accounts under Mom's name going back years, transactions routed into Garrick's business, some even labeled with check numbers and forged signatures. And then I saw it, an envelope with my name on it. I opened it. Inside were copies of statements, fake police reports dated years ago, letters drafted by Garrick accusing me of being emotionally unstable, violent, unpredictable. It was all there, ready to be used. He'd built the perfect fallback story. If Lennox ever comes back, this is how we paint him. It wasn't a defense. It was premeditated. He didn't just abuse Mom. He prepared to erase me. My stomach turned, but I didn't let the rage control me. I stuffed the documents into my jacket and shut the safe. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Above me. Getting closer. I ducked into the shadows behind the metal shelving, heart pounding. The basement door creaked open. He stepped down slowly. Not Silas. Garrick. He flicked on the light and stopped. His eyes locked on the open safe. His face went pale. He scanned the room. Then his voice, low, almost hissed, slithered out. "What did you take?" I stepped out from behind the shelves, slow, calm. No fear, just truth. "Everything you were afraid I'd find." He didn't speak. For the first time, I saw something I never expected in his eyes. Fear, not confidence, not control, fear. And it was quiet. So quiet I could hear the hum of the old furnace, the same one I used to fall asleep to as a kid, back when this house felt safe. I didn't say a word, just held his stare. He shifted first. When I climbed those basement stairs, every step felt heavier than the last. The folder inside my jacket pressed close to my chest like a second heartbeat. Mom stood at the top, wringing her hands. Her eyes darted between me and the hallway like she expected screaming, or worse. I kept my voice low. "It's okay. You're safe now." Behind her, Silas leaned against the wall, jaw clenched, unsure if he should step in or step away. His eyes flicked from me to Garrick, still lingering in the shadows. I walked past them without another word and headed to the dining room. I laid everything on the table, documents, ledgers, forged forms, one after the other. The kind of evidence that doesn't ask for attention. It demands it. Each page landed with a soft slap, but in the silence of that room, it sounded louder than any argument we'd ever had. Silas hesitated, then stepped forward. "Dad, what is this?" Garrick opened his mouth, ready to pivot, to lie, to spin, but I raised a hand. "Let him read it," I said, eyes still locked on Garrick. Silas turned the pages. The color drained from his face with each one. He didn't ask another question. Mom moved slowly toward us. Her hand trembled as she reached for the edge of a paper. She didn't read it. She didn't need to. Her tears weren't about what she saw. They were about what she finally knew. She didn't have to deny anymore. Garrick cracked. His words spilled fast, too fast. Talk of stress, old tax records, miscommunications, tough love that Mom must have misread. Then, like clockwork, he turned to me. "This was your idea, wasn't it?" he barked. "You created this mess. You forged half of this. You've been jealous since the day I slid my phone onto the table, tapped once, and stepped back. His own voice played through the speaker, recorded earlier from the basement. "What did you take?" The silence after was thicker than anything he could spin, Garrick's face buckled, not just from exposure, from the realization that he no longer controlled the room. Mom covered her mouth with both hands, her knees nearly giving out. She looked at me, not pleading, just steady. "Do we have enough?" she asked. I nodded once. She reached for her phone. Her grip wavered at first, but then she steadied it with both hands. She dialed. "I'd like to report financial abuse," she said softly. "Yes, I have documents." Garrick surged forward. I stepped in his path before she even looked up. He stopped cold, inches from my chest. And for once, he didn't push. He just stared, not at me, but at what I had become, a wall he couldn't pass. It didn't take long for the same two deputies to return. This time, they didn't come with smiles. Mom greeted them at the door, calm, composed. She didn't fumble. She didn't cry. She rolled up her sleeve. She let them see the bruises. She laid out the paperwork, the power of attorney copies, the financial records. She handed them the envelope Garrick had prepared to destroy me. "I didn't know he had it," she told them, voice strong. "But I know now." Silas stepped in quietly. He moved money. I thought it was part of business, but it didn't make sense. Not for years. The older deputy turned to Garrick. "Sir, you'll need to come with us. We'll talk more at the station." No smirk this time. No clever line. He looked small, like a balloon someone forgot to tie shut. They cuffed him, not roughly, just professionally. I watched him disappear into the cruiser, face blank behind the window glass. Then the silence settled. But it wasn't sharp or cold anymore. It was full. Like the house had finally exhaled. Mom sat on the couch, shoulders hunched, a blanket over her lap. I sat beside her. We didn't speak for a long time. Her fingers twitched from adrenaline. Mine did too. I could hear the floor creak upstairs, Silas moving room to room, not snooping, just wandering, maybe for the first time seeing the house without Garrick's shadow hanging over everything. Mom spoke first. "I didn't think I'd ever feel quiet again," she whispered. "Not real quiet, just peace." I rested my hand over hers. "You can feel it now." She smiled faintly. Then something small, strange happened. She stood up and walked to the hallway, pulled open the closet. From inside, she took out that stained apron, the one he made her wear, the one labeled family servant. She held it for a beat, then dropped it into a trash bag. "Want me to do the honors?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, I've got it." She took the bag out to the bins behind the house, came back inside and sat again, not saying a word but breathing easier. Then she turned to me and said, "You really just came to surprise me?" "Yeah," I nodded. "Thought we'd get breakfast, hash browns, maybe a big cinnamon roll." She laughed through the tears. "I'd like that." It was the first laugh I'd heard from her that didn't carry pain. Later that afternoon, the sun filtered in through the blinds he always kept shut. We walked the house together, room by room. She opened windows. I swept up dust balls in corners. Together we shut off the lights Garrick always insisted stay on, to keep order. She paused at the kitchen sink, looking out the window. "You staying?" she asked. I leaned against the doorway. "Not for a weekend, for however long it takes." She didn't say thank you. She didn't have to. She just smiled, then whispered, "Then maybe I'll finally sleep." I stepped outside just before sunset. The porch creaked under my weight. Wind rustled through the dry trees. Beyond the fence line, somewhere, a dog barked in the distance. This house used to feel like a place people disappeared into. Now it felt like somewhere people could return to. I stood there a long while, just watching the day fold itself up. It wasn't all fixed. Not yet. But it was starting. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I'd come home to fight. I'd come home to rebuild.